All right, let's dive right into this explainer covering the incredibly dense Session 8 of the 2026 LCMS Convention. We're looking specifically at Wednesday afternoon, July 22nd in Phoenix. If you've been following along, you know this session was packed with some really heavy lifting. Everything from foundational doctrinal affirmations to some critical administrative structures. We're going to break it all down chronologically, relying strictly on the official minutes and session transcripts, so you'll know exactly what happened, how the votes landed, and why this all actually matters for your local congregation. Let's get started. Here's our quick agenda for Session 8. We'll be hitting 1. Commemoration and convention elections, 2. Fellowship and university identity, 3. The Concordia University system, 4. Church practice and mercy, 5. Final actions and verifications, and finally, 6. Our Redeemer lives. Starting off with Section 1, Commemoration and convention elections, grounding the work and casting ballots. To ground the work spiritually, President Michael Gibson actually opened this afternoon's session with a sermon for the commemoration of the faithful departed. He leaned heavily into Romans chapter 6, specifically verses 3 through 11, emphasizing baptism as our absolute touchstone. The core message here? The baptized have been joined to Christ's death, the old sinful self is crucified, and Christ, raised from the dead, will never die again. It was a beautiful way to set a charitable, eternal frame around the earthly administration that was about to follow. When you start an intense business meeting with the confession, "I know that my Redeemer lives," it really puts all those upcoming debates, amendments, and votes into their proper temporary perspective. Right after Tuesday's minutes were officially approved, the Assembly got straight to work, completing 16 elections for the Concordia University Regents and the Commission on Worship. Let's run through who was elected. We saw Bruce Schultz, Donald Fondo, Tia Esser, and Paul Hinz. Then Roses Summers, Neil Vandergush, and Miguel Rees, along with William Brandt, Bob Skazenzi, and Lance O'Donnell, Jennifer Knox, David Lambert, and Stephen Saunders. And finally, for the Commission on Worship, Stephen Mueller, Paul Solek, and Joseph Olson. Now, standard procedure saw some multi-ballot races just to secure majorities for certain positions. But here's where things get interesting. The election for Concordia, Texas Regents came with a very specific caveat. Their election by the convention didn't actually guarantee they would be seated, and that's because of the ongoing, unresolved litigation there. Moving right along to Section 2, Fellowship and University Identity, looking at the ALC and Concordia standards. First up was Resolution 515, which concerned church fellowship with the AALC, the American Association of Lutheran Churches. The debate really centered around unresolved cases involving pastors or congregations that were received by the AALC. An amendment was brought forward to add the phrase, "to work in good faith," to ensure mutual respect. That amendment passed 574 to 310. With that wording added, the twice-amended Resolution 515 overwhelmingly passed 813 to 87. The big takeaway here? Church fellowship was not severed. Instead, the Synod focused on reconciliatory dialogue and accountability for those unresolved pastors and congregations. Next was Resolution 707A, tackling Lutheran identity across the Concordia universities. There was a push to make the CTCR, the Commission on Theology and Church Relations, the lead entity on defining this identity, but that amendment failed. The Assembly decided the Concordia University System Board of Directors should retain the lead. The main resolution then passed 773 to 143, firmly grounding university governance, campus culture, and Christ-centered identity in Scripture and the Confessions. That brings us to Section 3, the Concordia University System, focusing on governance and Ann Arbor. The convention took up Resolution 708A next, which asked whether the Concordia University system should remain a synod-wide corporation or become a commission. This one passed by a massive margin, 850 to 53. But let's be clear about what this did. It commissioned a study for 2029. It did not immediately restructure the CUS. Then came Resolution 709A regarding Concordia Ann Arbor. Some delegates proposed an amendment to delete the words "and present" from the leadership commendation, essentially wanting to withhold praise for current leaders, but that failed 186 to 708. The full resolution then passed 818 to 91. This was a really poignant moment. It formally acknowledged the grief over program reductions there, commended both past and present leaders, encouraged future church work programs, and united the room in singing the doxology as a prayer for healing. All right, Section 4, Church Practice and Mercy. looking at communion, scripture, and disaster response. Things got pretty detailed here. Resolution 505 addressed closed communion. An amendment to insert the mandatory word must narrowly failed 414 to 437. A primary amendment also failed 377 to 506. Ultimately, the resolution passed 787 to 114. It reaffirmed the doctrine, catechesis, and pastoral supervision while still allowing pastoral discretion in extraordinary circumstances. Then, Resolution 509A on public scripture reading. A recommendation for action amendment failed, but an amendment for synod-wide study materials narrowly passed 453 to 436. The final resolution passed 607 to 296. Now, just to clarify a major point, this resolution did not ban laypeople or women from reading scripture publicly. It simply commissioned a comprehensive study, discussion, and reporting on the topic. After a brief, graceful moment recognizing the incoming and outgoing synod officers, the convention shifted focus globally with a powerful presentation on the disaster response in Brazil. We saw a timeline tracking years of LCMS partnership, transitioning into months of training, weeks of massive flooding, and days of immediate financial assistance. It really highlighted the ongoing theology of the cross that sustains believers through total devastation. Back to the business floor, Resolution 301A focused on life ministry. A clarifying amendment regarding faith-based nonprofits passed 502 to 317, leading to a huge 779 to 68 victory for the full resolution. A later motion to reconsider it completely failed. This was an incredible celebration of the Life Match program, the vital work of pregnancy resource ministries, the tireless volunteers, families served, and most importantly, the children saved from abortion. Down the home stretch, Section 5, Final Actions and Verifications. Committee 10 introduced an addition to Bylaw 4.2.4, adding the phrase, as determined by the Synod President, though we should note this still legally required Thursday ratification. Next, Resolution 508A, which clarified the roles of men and women in the Church, passed decisively, 742 to 138. And finally for this group, Resolution 302A, encouraging Christian care through adoption and fostering. A digital resource amendment for this failed 301 to 543, and the resolution was then adopted without amendment by voice vote. We do need to flag a quick discrepancy here regarding convention records. The automated transcript shows Resolution 514 being introduced and adopted, but the official supplied minutes for Session 8 omit it entirely. Because of this conflict in our source material, we have to responsibly label this as verification needed, pending the final official proceedings. And finally, Section 6, Our Redeemer Lives, the Heavenly Perspective. So, to summarize the afternoon, the Assembly completed all conventional elections, launched major structural studies for the university system, and navigated complex fellowship resolutions. What remained for Thursday were the final ratifications and consent calendars. Why does all of this matter? Because these decisions directly shape the doctrinal fellowship, pastoral education, and the ministry practice of your local congregations. Following the afternoon announcements, the session concluded with responsive prayer drawn from Job 19, specifically verses 25 through 27, bringing the delegates full circle to the hymn, I Know That My Redeemer Lives. Ultimately, what you should take away from this is a profound truth. No election, no matter how contested, no resolution, and no bylaw raises the dead. Christ crucified and risen preserves his church through his word and sacraments. That is the true foundation that outlasts any convention. Thanks for walking through this session with us.